If you are over 60, there are 5 food mistakes that speed up dementia, and chances are you are making at least one of them today, thinking it is actually good for you. That is the part nobody warns you about. The damage is not coming from the obvious bad choices. It is coming from the habits that look healthy. I'm Brenda, and today we're going to talk about the 5 food mistakes that speed up dementia after 60. Dorothy had been eating the same breakfast for 11 years. Oatmeal with skim milk, a glass of orange juice, and a small bowl of fruit with low-fat yogurt on the side. She was proud of that breakfast. Her doctor had told her years ago to cut the fat, watch the sugar, stay consistent. And she did. Every single morning, no exceptions. By the time she came to our support group, she was 67, and her daughter had started driving her to appointments because Dorothy kept forgetting where she had parked. She called it senior moments. But her daughter had seen enough to be worried. When we talked about her daily routine, that breakfast came up. And I want to be honest with you. What Dorothy was eating every single morning was quietly doing damage. Not because she was careless, because she had been following advice that was decades out of date. 3 of the 5 mistakes we are covering today were on her plate before 8 in the morning. By the time this video ends, you will know exactly which ones, why each of them matters to your brain specifically, and what to swap in starting today. The first mistake is the one that catches people most off guard because it does not look like junk food. It does not come in a bag of chips or a fast food wrapper. It comes in boxes labeled whole grain. It comes in yogurt cups marketed as a healthy snack. It comes in granola bars sold at health food stores and in frozen meals with pictures of vegetables on the front. Ultra-processed food. The definition matters here, so let me be precise. Ultra-processed does not simply mean processed. Cheese is processed. Canned tomatoes are processed. Olive oil is processed. Ultra-processed means the product has been so industrially transformed that it barely resembles its original ingredients. And it typically contains emulsifiers, artificial flavors, stabilizers, modified starches, and added sugars that have no equivalent in anything you would cook at home. A 2022 study published in Neurology followed more than 10,000 adults over a period of 10 years and found that those who got 20% or more of their daily calories from ultra-processed foods showed cognitive decline at a rate 28% faster than those who ate the least of it. That is not a small number. That is nearly a third faster. Here is the mechanism, and it is simpler than you might expect. When you eat ultra-processed food regularly, it triggers a low-grade inflammatory response in the body. That inflammation does not stay in your gut. It crosses what scientists call the blood-brain barrier, the protective filter designed to keep harmful substances away from your brain tissue. And it creates neuroinflammation. Chronic, ongoing, low-level inflammation inside the brain itself. And here is why that matters specifically after 60. The aging brain is already more vulnerable to inflammatory damage. The blood-brain barrier becomes more permeable with age. The brain's own immune cells, called microglia, become more reactive. So the same dietary pattern that a 35-year-old might tolerate without obvious symptoms can produce measurable cognitive effects in someone your age within a much shorter window. Dorothy's low-fat yogurt with fruit on the bottom, her orange juice, her packaged oatmeal with added flavor, all of it ultra-processed, all of it feeding that inflammatory cycle every single morning. The practical action here is not to eat perfectly. It is to shift the ratio. Families I have worked with have seen real differences simply by replacing one ultra-processed item per meal with a whole food equivalent. Not a diet overhaul, one swap per meal. Greek yogurt with no added flavor instead of the fruit on the bottom cup. Steel-cut oats instead of instant. Water, or a piece of fruit instead of juice. Those 3 changes alone can meaningfully reduce your daily ultra-processed load. For 40 years, avoiding fat was considered responsible. That advice aged badly. If you grew up being told that fat clogs your arteries and that low-fat options are the smart choice, you absorbed a message that was everywhere from the 1980s onward. Low-fat milk, low-fat salad dressing, margarine instead of butter, skip the egg yolk, avoid the avocado. And for millions of people over 60, those habits became permanent. because they were never told the story had changed. Here is what that advice missed entirely. Your brain is approximately 60% fat by dry weight. It is the most fat-dense organ in the human body, and the myelin sheath, the protective coating that wraps around your nerve fibers and allows electrical signals to travel quickly and accurately between brain cells, is almost entirely made of fat. Specifically, it depends on a steady supply of healthy fats from your diet to maintain its structure. When you chronically underconsume healthy fats, that myelin sheath thins, signal transmission slows, the communication between different regions of the brain becomes less efficient. Over time, this shows up as slower processing speed, difficulty retrieving words, and the kind of mental fogginess that many people over 60 attribute to normal aging, when in some cases it is directly related to what they stopped eating decades ago. The data on omega-3 fatty acids and brain aging is now among the most replicated findings in nutritional neuroscience. DHA, the specific omega-3 found in fatty fish, is the dominant structural fat in brain cell membranes. Low DHA levels in older adults have been associated with smaller brain volume, faster memory decline, and higher markers of neurodegeneration. The practical correction is not complicated. Fatty fish 2 to 3 times per week, salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, a small handful of walnuts daily, half an avocado with lunch, olive oil as your primary cooking fat. These are not supplements or specialty products. They are foods your grandparents would have recognized, eaten before the low-fat era told everyone to be afraid of them. Dorothy's skim milk and low-fat yogurt every morning, years of avoiding the egg yolk, a refrigerator full of fat-free dressings. Her brain had been running low on the raw material it needed for basic maintenance, and she had been doing it conscientiously, thinking she was being careful. There are 37 grams of added sugar in what most people consider a healthy breakfast. Let that land for a second. That single number, 37 grams, is what you get from a standard flavored yogurt, a glass of orange juice, and a packet of flavored oatmeal. All 3 items carry health claims on the label. All 3 are staples in millions of households across this country. And together, before 9 in the morning, they deliver more added sugar than the American Heart Association recommends for an entire day. But the problem is not just blood glucose and weight. What added sugar does specifically to brain tissue is a process called glycation, and most people have never heard of it. Glycation happens when sugar molecules in the bloodstream attach to proteins and fats and form compounds that researchers call advanced glycation end products. The abbreviated name for them is AGEs, and that is fitting because they accelerate aging at the cellular level. These compounds are not easily broken down. They accumulate in tissue over time, and in the brain they have been found in the same protein structures, amyloid plaques and tau tangles, that are the pathological hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Chronically elevated blood sugar does not just stress your pancreas. It stiffens and damages the very proteins your brain depends on to function. And the older the brain, the less efficiently it clears those damaged proteins out. A large study drawing from the UK Biobank, examining over 37,000 adults, found that people with higher dietary sugar intake showed significantly greater reductions in hippocampal volume over time. The hippocampus is the brain region most critical for forming new memories, and one of the first areas to show damage in Alzheimer's disease. The action step here is specific. Start reading the added sugars line on nutrition labels, not total sugars, added sugars. That line became mandatory on US labels in 2020. Anything above 10 grams per serving deserves a second look. Swap flavored products for unflavored versions and add your own whole fruit. Replace juice with water and eat the fruit itself. These are not dramatic changes. They are precise ones, and precision is what matters here. Most people over 60 have not had a full glass of water since morning by the time afternoon hits. They just do not feel thirsty anymore. That is not a character flaw. It is physiology. After 60, the body's thirst mechanism becomes significantly less reliable. The sensation of thirst diminishes with age. Many older adults move through most of the day in a mild state of dehydration without ever registering it as a problem, and without connecting the afternoon mental fog, the slower word retrieval, or the difficulty holding a train of thought to the fact that they simply have not had enough to drink. The brain is approximately 75% water. Even mild dehydration, a loss of just 1 to 2% of body water, has been shown in controlled studies to impair short-term memory, reduce attention span, and slow processing speed in adults over 60 more significantly than in younger adults. The aging brain is less resilient to those fluctuations. Beyond immediate cognitive performance, chronic low-grade dehydration affects the brain's ability to clear metabolic waste. The glymphatic system, a network that flushes toxins out of the brain during sleep and periods of rest, operates more efficiently when the brain is adequately hydrated. When you are consistently underhydrated, that clearance process is compromised. Waste products, including the amyloid proteins associated with Alzheimer's, accumulate more readily. A woman in her early 70s I spoke with some time ago told me she drank 2 cups of coffee in the morning and maybe a glass of water with dinner, and nothing in between. She had been living that way for years. Within 6 weeks of deliberately increasing her daily fluid intake, her daughter noticed she seemed sharper in the afternoons, more present in conversation, less likely to lose her train of thought mid-sentence. The practical target for most adults over 60 is 6 to 8 cups of water per day. Coffee and tea count partially, but also carry mild diuretic effects, so they do not substitute completely. One habit that works consistently: keep a full glass of water on the kitchen counter at all times. Not in the cabinet, not in the fridge, on the counter, where it creates a visual prompt you cannot ignore. This one is going to push back against something you may have been told by a doctor. Regular alcohol consumption, even at levels considered moderate, accelerates brain aging after 60 in ways that most standard medical guidance has been slow to acknowledge. The advice many people received years ago suggested that 1 or 2 drinks per day was harmless and possibly even beneficial for heart health. That research was real, though it has since been significantly complicated by more rigorous studies. What it never adequately addressed was the brain. Here is what we know now. Alcohol is a neurotoxin. At high doses, that is unambiguous. At lower doses, the picture is more nuanced, but the nuance shifts considerably after 60. The aging brain metabolizes alcohol more slowly. Blood alcohol levels run higher in older adults consuming the same amount as younger adults. The brain's capacity to repair alcohol-related cellular damage declines with age. And alcohol disrupts the deep sleep stages, during which the glymphatic system does its most critical work. The same waste clearance process we just covered. A landmark analysis published in The Lancet examined data from 28 countries and concluded there is no fully risk-free level of alcohol consumption when the complete range of health outcomes is considered. More specifically to brain aging, a study in Nature Communications found that even moderate drinkers, defined as 7 to 14 drinks per week, showed measurable reductions in overall brain volume compared to non-drinkers, with effects that compounded over time. I am not here to tell you never to have a glass of wine at a family dinner. That is not a conversation I can have for you. What I can tell you is that if you are over 60 and you have a daily drinking habit, even one you consider modest, your brain is paying a cost that it could not pay as easily a decade ago. The threshold that carried relatively low risk at 45 is not the same threshold at 65. That is not a moral position. It is biology. The honest step here is not guilt, and it is not an overnight overhaul. It is paying attention to the morning after. If the days you drink are followed by mornings where your thinking feels slower, where finding words takes longer, where you feel less sharp than usual, that pattern is information worth taking seriously. Before I bring everything together, I want to ask you something directly. Of these 5 mistakes, ultra-processed food, avoiding healthy fats, added sugar, chronic dehydration, and regular alcohol, which one surprised you most? Which one were you not expecting to see on this list? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and what you share helps me understand exactly what to cover next for people in your situation. Let me bring this together now, because I want you to leave with something you can actually use today. Not just a list of concerns, but a clear action for each one. Ultra-processed food drives neuroinflammation through the blood-brain barrier. The fix is one whole food swap per meal. Start at breakfast. Avoiding healthy fats starves the myelin sheath of what it needs to keep your neural signals fast and accurate. Bring back fatty fish, walnuts, avocado, and olive oil. They are not the enemy, and the science has been clear on this for years. Added sugar triggers glycation damage in brain proteins at a structural level. Read the added sugars line on every label and target under 10 grams per serving. Chronic dehydration impairs memory consolidation and slows your brain's own waste clearance system. 6 to 8 cups of water daily, with a visible glass on the counter as your standing reminder. And regular alcohol after 60 accelerates brain volume loss and disrupts the very sleep your brain needs to clean itself. Honest self-assessment, not judgment, just honesty about what the morning after is telling you. None of these require a complete life overhaul. Each one is a single, specific change. And what we know from the evidence is that dietary modifications in adults over 60 can meaningfully slow the trajectory of cognitive decline. Not reverse what has already happened, but slow what comes next. That gap between where you are now and where you could be in 5 or 10 years is real. And what you put on your plate between now and then is one of the few variables you actually control. If this video gave you something useful, subscribe to this channel. Every week I cover the kind of information that should reach people over 60 long before a diagnosis makes it urgent, practical, grounded in evidence, and designed for the decisions you are making right now. The information in this video is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your physician or a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your diet, particularly if you have existing health conditions or take medications.